Yes, yes, I do. Okay. The regular meeting of the Common Council, City of Oneonta, May 17th, is now in session, and the clerk will call roll.
Mayor Grant.
Here.
Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Risberger.
Here.
Councilmember Parmentier. Present. Councilmember Carson.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson. Councilmember Bradford.
Here.
Councilmember Duffy.
And Councilmember Carson, if you lead us in the pledge. To the flag. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that, we'll open up the floor to petitioners first. Have we any petitioners? Yes.
Andrew Hamill, Ward 1, 20 Gardner Place, Wilbur Park Apartments. I'm asking in regards to the $50,000 for the repair works for the baseball field. Is there a possibility that instead of having the $50,000 go to the repairs, that can go to, say, the Public Arts Commission instead? Because they want to do like any projects like the murals or what have you. That's all more or less I'd ask in regards to that.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I believe, I think I can speak for myself anyway. I believe that the Arts Commission will continue to make progress towards expanding the baseball field. We have tenants for, we want to make sure we are living up to our end of their expectations of the repairs to that field are necessary in order to accommodate the expectations of those folks that use the field. But we will, I think there's a general consensus among council and certainly in the city that the Arts Commission is very important. And I expect that they'll be okay as we move forward.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
Thank you very much. If there are any other petitioners, this would be a great time. If not, then we do have a public hearing before us regarding the, sorry, that in fact was relative to the public hearing. So thank you very much, Andrew. You got
Andrew, welcome.
jumped ahead of me there. Any other folks here for the public hearing piece of this relative to the $50,000 with repair and reserve to fund the New York Park baseball field number 6? Rick, is there anything that you would add to what I put out there? All right. Yes.
Yeah, and just, I'm not speaking from a place of expertise, just from what my understanding is that because these funds are coming from the repair reserve, public arts wouldn't count as a repair.
Okay.
So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, and I'm gonna talk about it a little bit more in the in my Parks and Rec report, but field 6 is rented pretty heavily. And so to the mayor's point, there is some revenue that's coming into the general fund from those rentals. So I just want to share that with you.
Okay.
And I'll talk a little bit more about it in my Parks report.
Okay.
And we have someone joining us. I'll let you take a seat and we are just now in that part of our council meeting where petitioners are given the floor, or if you're here for the public hearing on the $50,000 that's being spent for repair to fund the baseball field number 6 in field restoration project. Are you here for either of those concerns? Okay. You want to speak?
Oh, I do want to speak.
Right, that's the petitioner portion of it.
Oh,
Okay, yes, please.
okay. My name is Marilyn Bell, and I live at 9 Suncrest Terrace, Oneonta. And we have a water problem, not rainwater or runoff, but potable water. And I've spoken with Chris from the water department, and the water department has been lovely. They've been out, I don't know how many times. We now have on the street two valves, I don't know what you call them, that shoot out water now only on Mondays from 8 to 11. It used to be every single day to clean the pipes. According to Chris, we need new water pipes. And he informed us that the city has no money to replace the pipes at this time. And it would possibly be 2 years. If any one of you would like to drink this, you're more than welcome. Is this every day? No, when they flush it on Monday, it's pretty clean for the next few days. And then we get rust. This is not acceptable. I know nothing about class action lawsuits, but if necessary, I will look into it. I will call the state, the Board of Health. This is not I pay water bills, almost $500 a year. I expect potable water. Len knows, he's been up there. Chris came to our house. It's not just my house on the street. 30 years ago, they put in a pump. They told me my house was at the end of a closed loop. I do not know what that means. According to Chris, this year, that water pump did more damage than good. I don't know, for 30 years, we had clean water. This started about 18 months ago. This year, maybe 20 months ago now. And to be told that they have no money and it can't be fixed. We have 57 houses. And I don't know if 55 of us have the problem or 53 of us, but it's our entire street. And so I came to talk about it and to see what the Common Council can do. You can't drink the water. We buy bottled water, and we've just now, and the city is going to get the bill for it. We just had to put in a filtration system. We're not the only house that put in a filtration system. There's some other houses that have too. That's really not the answer. The answer is we pay $500 for sewer and water. We pay our taxes. I've lived up there for 51 years and have never had this coming from my sink. And no, it's not the hot water tank. I mean, so please don't tell me to flush the hot water tank.
Thank you. Greg, can you address this at all?
Sure, I think this is, and first of all, I apologize that you guys are dealing with this issue. Certainly, we aspire to deliver crystal clear water to all customers. The city's water system is old, it is aging. As Chris had mentioned in his conversations with you, that there are pipes such as the one on Suncrest Terrace that are in need of rehabilitation or replacement. And what needs to happen up there is either a cleaning and lining of the main or replacement of the main eventually. That's the case in probably 2/3 of our mains across the city. Obviously, we can't afford to replace them all at once, and they need to be prioritized. And I'm not saying that yours is not a priority. We've talked about this the last few years with council, the need to increase our water and sewer rates in order to be able to afford to increase the rate at which we replace and upgrade our mains. I'm not sure the age of Suncrest Terrace's main.
70 years roughly.
70s or 60s, 70s.
The pipe is roughly 70. At least that's what I was told.
Yeah,
I've only lived there for 51.
right. I would think around the 50s as well.
But
and we have pipes older than that even. The issue is pipes build up circulation on the inside.
Yep.
They tend to collect more sediment things and when there's disturbance, depending on how the system works hydraulically, it can kick up material which causes that discoloration. It is potable. It is safe to drink. It is not.
you want to drink it? I brought a bottle for you. Go for it.
I'm not saying that that's what we aspire to provide, again. We can do better, and we'd like to do better, but that costs money. And that's why these projects need to be prioritized and we need to identify funding sources for them and get them on our capital plans to make these improvements.
Greg, how often are we flushing that line up there and why?
Once a week
Once a week.
Why are we flushing that every week?
to keep it clean.
Why are we flushing it every week?
In an attempt to keep water. I mean, essentially, Christie, I don't know if you want to jump in because you're a little more familiar with recent changes as far as flushing. In the past, we had, I'm not going to get into the hydraulics of the system, but that area, Suncrest Terrace, College Terrace, Overlook Drive, is fed from multiple sources. So the water can move one direction and then the other. It's a long stretch. There's long stretches with, it's a suburban type, where there are not a lot of uses on that long stretch of main, so water can tend to sit. And if it moves again, it stirs things up and we have these issues. And certainly these folks aren't the only ones that have come to us with issues. We've been dealing with this for 5 or 6 years. With issues
I understand the
with
disturbance.
and we've been making whatever operational changes we can to try to make things, temple for everybody.
I understand the turbidity of water and how that, when we flush, that kicks up sediment in the pipes. And it is potable water, but most of the time when the flushing is done in the city, people deal with it for a day or two and then it goes away. I guess I just don't understand why we have, this is, everywhere else in the city, they flush maybe once or twice a year. And we're flushing every week.
Right, it's not the flushing that's causing the issues. Flushing is getting towards something to try to clear out what's up there.
It's the fact that it's basically a dead end line, so we don't have like a large draw of water coming through that line on a continual basis, so you have a dead end. So sediment builds up at that end, so we flush it weekly.
So this is the same issue that's over at the Riverside School?
Similar, yeah.
Yeah, I thought there was a pump that was put in there years ago that was supposed to take care of it, but it didn't work either.
I'm not familiar with that situation.
Are you talking about Riverside or are you talking about Suncrest?
No, I was talking about Riverside.
There was no pump.
There's no pumps. Okay.
What Marilyn was referring
We have a
to.
pump in the street.
Yes, there was a pump. Okay. The street would have circulating water and Suncrest, there's that whole neighborhood that multiple directions, so there's not a lot of water flow that comes in. Water flow.
If you want to see a picture of the flusher, it's on my phone.
Marilyn, as it stands now, I think what I'd like to suggest that we may do is there are a prioritization of the mitigations throughout the city. If we can determine a date, it may not be soon, but knowing what our strategy is and what our calendar is would probably at least be some comfort to you, I would imagine.
Something has got to be done. Otherwise, I don't want to pay water bills. I watch how many hundreds of gallons flow out of this flush valve. I don't know what to call it because I don't know the name. Every Monday from 8 to 11. Last year was every single day, 8 to 11. Hundreds and thousands of gallons of water have to come out in order to clean the pipe. This is insanity. Then you need to look at what are we doing to correct the situation. I mean, the water that runs out, and I mean, it gushes out, and we have 2 of them on our street. One on Suncrest and one on College Terrace, and both flush out.
So again, so what I would suggest is, it may not be what you want to hear at this moment, but I think that we can strategize and provide you a timeline so that at least you have some sort of sense of when we will be able to take care of this issue.
24 months is not a good timeline, and that was whether it's valves that need work on But 24 months from now is not a good timeline.
So let's see what we are able to determine. Relative, there's a lot of schedule of work that's already been done, and we'll have the conversation. The bottom line is, we want to provide you with information. Okay, rather you know where we're going with things than you have to wonder about it. So we'll try to figure out where we are, where you are in that schedule, so that you at least have some sort of sense of what to expect from these documents.
Money is obviously a problem. And you have a budget and you have so much money to spend. Are there special grants from the state or through the federal government or through the infrastructure bills that were passed designed just to fix water problems? So I think there are through the federal infrastructure program that may could become available to the city of Oneonta, because nobody in the country wants repeats of the problems that happened in Michigan, where the people would, have bad water.
And so there are, and we've been taking advantage of them. And again, so what I'm telling you, what we will do is provide you with some information, so that with information, at least you're not guessing as to what the future pertains to.
Okay.
All right.
So now you buy water to drink. Occasionally, it's even with the filters, things get overflowed and we have to go to laundromats because you can't wash your clothes in that kind of water. It's not a very desirable situation.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
I think it would be helpful to the council if we received a report on what it would, what the issue is specifically, and what the solution would be, and how much approximately it's going to take care of the problem. And I think that's the first step, and then we can go from there to figure out, okay, when can we get this done as soon as possible? Because I don't agree that this is a typical problem around the city. I think we all would have heard this before tonight if it was. And so I think this is something that we need to address as soon as we can. But I think the first step is to find out, what are we dealing with? What's it going to take? And what's the cost?
So I will defer to Chris and to Greg on that. You'll get back with us, and we will, bottom line, what I'm promising you is information so that you know with some comfort, at least, what the future, presents for you. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other petitioners? Okay, thank you again very much. We are going to, I'm going to move the mayor's remarks to the top of the agenda here. So on Saturday, while Oneonta was enjoying a day of community activity, music and dining and shopping in our charming little downtown, and when having a nice time, glad to be enjoying one another's company on a beautiful day. Just a few hours away, an unspeakable evil was being unleashed on folks just as unsuspecting as we would be. In a rampage that violently ended the lives of 10 innocent people and has now torn apart the fabric of a community. That beautiful sunny Saturday became the darkest day imaginable. The embrace of a conspiracy theory and the devaluation of the lives of fellow human beings has made the city of Buffalo is the latest seen in a too long list of horrific acts perpetrated in the name of white supremacy. It's hard to fathom the depths of hatred that would lead to such an act. But I firmly believe that love and respect and inclusion. And the celebration of diversity is the light that takes us out of the darkness. It is at the moral center of who we are as Oneantans. And in the face of those with hateful intent, we will celebrate diversity. We will empower the least among us and always encourage respectful dialogue. We will embrace our brothers and sisters and endeavor to treat them as we would be treated. Love, respect, and the truth always win in the end. As we subscribe to that, let's rededicate ourselves to being vessels for a better future. I ask that you join me in a moment of silence as we remember those who've been lost. Thank you. That was my remarks. And with that, we move to our boards and commissions reports. And we'll start with our housing commission. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We met on May 4th at 7 o'clock. They voted in the new chair of Jen Armstrong and vice chair of Julian Fox. They discussed the fair housing update, and they are passing that up to the next committee for their approval.
Any questions for Scott on the goings on of the housing commission? None. So the environmental board is next up, and that's Councilmember Davies.
Thanks, Mayor. The environmental board met on May 10th. So let's see, the standing committees is kind of where we went to. Urban Forest reported that late summer there will be arrival of 20 elms, so they'll be putting those in the ground. I think I've been reporting that for a while, so we were kind of building towards this event. Community engagement, they have a Facebook page that has 95 likes. The goal is to get to 100. So if you are watching or if you're listening, if you can follow the environmental board Facebook page, because when I get to 100, it allows them to be able to get access to understanding who's viewing and get some other metrics. I'm not really sure what, but they're certainly trying to shoot that goal. The Energy Committee discussed, spent quite a bit of time discussing 88 has been designated as an electric vehicle corridor, and so there's opportunities for some regional energy solutions and regional energy opportunities, and they're going to be investigating that a little further. The Public Spaces Committee, their creek naming project kind of got let's just say COVID in the public schools has derailed that. So they'll be trying to focus on that in the fall and working again with the local public schools to name some of the unnamed creeks in the area. And then the environmental board voted unanimously to send what I'm calling a green purchasing policy to us. They would like that to be reviewed and ultimately for the common council to adopt a green purchasing policy. I've submitted that to the Board of Infrastructure Committee Chairperson Risberger here, and we'll be hearing that or discussing that at the next meeting. And that concludes my remarks from the environmental board.
Perfect. Any, yes?
I'm sorry, actually, my question is for Scott. You moved on pretty quickly. Let's go back to the housing commission. Sorry, Mark. Does anyone have any questions for the environmental board? Sorry, your report's always really thorough. That's why. Okay, so I just wanted to ask about the housing commission. If you could share with us, if you know, if they have done any strategizing in terms of like what they're going to be working on, what projects they're going to be working on, what sort of path they're going to take. This is a big problem. So have they started to break it down into like bite-size chunks yet, or?
I think the housing commission has been the biggest waste of time so far. We haven't gotten anything. This is like the third round of appointing chair people. It was a fight to get the Fair Housing Act through that Judy and Steve worked on. Something that should have taken maybe a month's time, and all the work that they've done. I think they're kind of wasting city staff time. Greg and the staff went out of their way to meet with them, to discuss things. I don't think that this commission is gonna get anything accomplished the way it stands at this point. The mayor showed up and tried to give a sense of direction. What I saw, witness, and I tell you guys to really watch the video of the housing commission that we just had, was probably one of the most political stunts I've ever seen in my life. Where some people went off and had their own separate meeting on the side and then came back at this meeting. And there was also some other remarks in there, which I was gonna bring up at the end of this, because I don't know if it's appropriate for public or if it's more of an executive session thing. For possibly,
I thought it was gonna be executive session because I was waiting to do that myself.
yeah. So that's why I was kind of waiting till the end to give more of a comprehensive report. I think that maybe the council, I think maybe we need to sit down at this point and try to, if we're gonna keep the housing commission the way it stands, try to maybe come up with a document of our top 3 things that we need them to work on and really look at, and give them a timeline to accomplish that. I know I kind of have the same thing with Dave. I try to sit back, try to let the committees do what they need to do. But I mean, it's discouraging at this point.
Scott,
Can I just jump in very quickly? Sure. Make everyone aware that I'm meeting individually with each member of the housing commission prior to their next meeting. Determine where they are in terms of where they need to go, whether or not they are in fact going to be assets in getting there. There is a general strategy that has been laid out for them, as you know, as you mentioned. I think the players are there. I need to know that everybody has a sense and a commitment to what is arguably the achievement of the most strategic goal that we have, which is to create additional opportunities for housing. This is not an unimportant commission, and so I'll be having this conversation with every one of these folks uniquely. I'll provide this council with my sense of that direction. If you want to take it beyond that and provide something more specific and more detailed, that's your prerogative. But I think at this moment in time, the most important thing that I can do in my position is to engage each individual and ascertain what their commitment is to solving this problem, and whether or not they're productive members of that conversation. So that's where I'm at. That's where I'm going these next couple of weeks, and I will provide the council with something of a narrative with that, as you feel that you should. And
so when we formed this committee, we gave them an outline of what their overall goals should be. But you're saying that they haven't narrowed that focus a little bit to things that they want to accomplish and achieve their own timelines? Because, I mean, you kind of want these committees to be autonomous and then feed information to the council to then move forward. So they haven't been able to do that, Scott?
They started out with one chair, started going down a sensitive path. They didn't like it. They voted that chair out. They went to a co-chair system.
I thought that chair, sorry to
Or
interrupt.
excuse me, he resigned,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So he resigned because they went to the co-chair system. And then he started down a path. Apparently didn't like it. And to say a coup would be the only way to say it. We voted him out and put in a new chair and a vice chair. And again, I think it's gonna be executive session on some of the stuff. I'm not gonna say that in public, but it's very concerning of some statements that he said. So I know they've been given the charge 2 or 3 times of what they're supposed to do. I know that they've worked with Judy and Steve and Greg. But there's nothing to come forward.
Let me ask you, our city attorney, is that executive session material since they're not employees?
I don't know what's been requested yet, but I have significant doubts that anything regarding the actions of the committee fall into any of the exceptions that allow for executive session.
So I was looking at the committee as a whole, I was looking at 2 individuals.
They're not employees. It's not a personnel matter.
That's I wasn't sure. That's why I went to the end because
I mean,
it's like
you talk
I asked.
about it, you could talk about a personnel matter, but that has to be a personnel matter that relates to an employee
Okay.
of the city of Oleana. It's appointees, if I understand that.
Did you want to go first?
No.
I have concerns about remarks that were made in that meeting for I took it as age discrimination. 2 individuals at that committee made age discriminatory remarks with regards to the chairmanship position. And I wanted to seek the council's position on this. I don't think it's the right forward movement. I don't find it forward moving at all when we use age as discrimination.
Can I ask I agree with
They
you. but-
specifically said they wanted a younger chairman. They felt that the commission could move forward without having a younger chairman. And so with that said, one of the 2 of them said it. They moved forward, and that's what Scott's saying. I would take it as that as a who basically got together and voted the chairman out, and then put 2 new chairmen. And so I don't think it's a right representation of what the city of Oleana residents are. I agree with Scott that as I look back to what the housing commission hasn't really gotten accomplished in the time period that they've been meeting. I also agree that the city staff have been putting in a lot of time and effort, and it's not their fault. The city staff have been working their butts off. It's the commission that hasn't been producing. And Mark, I'm just as disappointed as you on this. It's like, I was really hoping for both parts, because all 3 of us were together on the housing commission moving this thing forward. You worked really hard on what is their mantra, what are we going for? And we all agreed with that. And I think we had to write that draft 3 or 4 times, and so we all agreed with it. That's not what's being done.
No, I'm 100% behind you on that. I agree. I don't want to give up on it because I think it's something that we absolutely needed. But I would suggest let's wait until the mayor speaks with them and go from there. And then we can anything.
Agreed, but again, these 2 individuals put the city in a position that I personally don't want to be in.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't want anybody to be discriminated against age or race or religion, and I think it's inappropriate.
I just wanted to add, I think in addition to that, one of the things that kind of didn't sit right with me from the meeting prior was that they kind of joked about in an open meeting, how do we avoid having a public meeting? That's not the spirit of this council or any city employee that I've ever worked with. I think we're all very willing to show the public what we're doing. And it wasn't just like, let's get together in small work groups. It was like, they actively didn't tell other members of the commission that they were going to be meeting. And that just doesn't, it's not cool, man.
And I just want to, when they sat there and they started with the age thing. And then, so they put the younger one in, and then they turned right around and didn't even listen to what they were saying when they put the vice chair in. So they kind of didn't even listen to their own argument that they were saying. And Mayor, I'm gonna kind of disagree with you. I don't think we have the right people on this commission. And I think you really need to
These
talk to
are
them.
not my appointees.
I know,
I will.
I know, but I think I have the right as liaison to say that,
Of course.
is I think you really need to really talk to them, see if we can get going in the right direction, and maybe, I read the city charter, I think you can also remove them off
Okay.
there. And I think that might have to be a
It
possibility.
may well be. I'm going to have very individual conversations. We'll address every one of these issues.
Thank you. I hope you'll speak to them about this greater
I will.
transparency.
And we will move forward. It is arguably one of the most important bodies that convenes. It's been meeting for 8 months. We need to be making progress everywhere, and most specifically there. So I will bring back to council a narrative. I'll bring back to council my expectation of what that housing commission will be charged with doing in the short term. The council will have the option of being either agreeing with that or revising that. That's your prerogative. But I am going to ensure that we have the right people in place operating as our expectations of them, and as the community's expectations of them. So that's my promise to you, and I'll reconnect with you on the other side of it. All right, and I am so sorry, Councilmember Davies, you did put out a lot of information. I don't know if anyone recalls any of it, so if you can hold it up now. But if anyone does have a question for Councilmember Davies relative to the environmental board meeting, yes.
Yeah, I think just a quick one. Where are the elements going in? Are they gonna get sprinkled around? I think that's still to be determined. The environmental board works really closely with the city to try to identify places they'll put them and then put them in. So, yeah, cool.
Can I ask a follow-up question? If someone has a suggestion for a place for a tree, how would they get that?
You want to
suggestion
funnel
to-
that my way? I can funnel that right to the environmental
Cool.
board, since I don't have people's email from the top of my head, but I can certainly get that to the environmental board, and I'll try to review those places, speak to the city staff about it, and see if they're appropriate for site for the trees.
Awesome, thanks.
Mark,
Yeah.
what, you said something about the IEA and electric cord.
Yeah, so, well, now you get questions. So, yeah, ADA's been designated as electric vehicle corridor, and they're just trying to begin to look at what kind of regional solutions and opportunities might be created by that. So it was a brief discussion, really, as we need to target this as something to look into. Charging stations along 88 are certainly going to be popping up. We know that there's some down now. Forget what Rapido that's down there.
Rapido.
So they're looking at other ways maybe to think about what we might be able to do to support that. And obviously there's an economic tie as well, clearly.
Thank you.
Is that something eventually we'll get to the rest areas?
I think a lot of that's to be determined. Yeah. I mean, this is part of the trying to begin to green New York in a very quick way. And I think this is part of how we create the EV infrastructure. And so that we need to think about that. So how do we get ahead of that curve? How do we think about that as a city is what the environmental board is trying to do.
So we had the EV stations in the D flat, and those are gonna be relocated.
Yeah, they've been relocated, they're still within the construction,
Okay.
fenced in areas that are not accessible right now, but they're in their new location now, will be hopefully accessible. Once that fence is
Cool.
Any other questions for Councilman?
Environment, actually, Greg, it's probably more for you. Has the city started looking in and looking into doing electric vehicles as we start purchasing? Is there like some type of?
Yeah, you might recall, I think I first introduced it maybe last December, it's been a while now, but we're participating in an NICEAG funded program, fleet electrification study. So working with their consultant, they're kind of guiding us and a bunch of other municipalities, including Otsego County, through the process of evaluating and coming up with what our goals might be for fleet electrification, how long it's gonna take us to convert. You know, where do we start, what are our priorities, and also looking at the infrastructure we might need. We're trying. So I have a few more meetings with them left before we'll be coming back, probably through the committee process to really dive into that with the presentation, but you know, we're looking at buses and lighter duty vehicles as being the most likely first to be converted to electric over time. Obviously, as part of that, we need to have charging infrastructure, so we actually did a site visit at the bus depot down on Silas Lane, and we need to be looking at what it might take to install infrastructure. So by the end of this, we'll have something to report back to the environmental board and cover some probably like the infrastructure committee, you know. Thanks.
Don't have anything else for you.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Councilmember Davis. And we will move on now to the Public Arts Commission. Councilmember Corey Shu.
Awesome. They just blow me away all the time. Okay, so we met last Wednesday, May 11th, and there were 6 items on the agenda. There is some progress on the master plan, but they're hoping to get it to us by next month. So the plan is to break into small work groups in order to be able to move that forward to a place where they can approve it to send it up to us. They're putting out a public art survey, which is pretty brief, that they're going to be working with Carrie in order to get that out. I think they wanted to have it out this week. Artists, right? So sometime soon there will be a public art survey, and they talked about the timeline for how long that will be open and social media push behind that. There was an update on the what are they called? Utility boxes, and Chair Maloney has reached out to NYSEG and made contact with them about getting permission to either paint or use vinyl wraps on the utility boxes, and he's waiting on a response on that. But I think he really wanted to get that going, so he was going to try to pursue that a little bit more earnestly. There was some discussion of the content on the boxes and who, you know, is it going to be kind of juried by the commission? Who makes the call on what goes where? We talked a little bit about giving maybe like a neighborhood preference to people who live in proximity of the box and might want to improve their neighborhood in that way. Specifically, that conversation revolved around like schools. If there's a utility box design, maybe a class project would be to decorate the box. Let's see, we also talked about whether or not artists would receive a stipend, or if this would be like a community project where there would be some buy-in for people who wanted to participate. And I think that's sort of TBD. I had the great honor of telling them that there may be some funding heading their way, which they were all very thrilled about. The master plan I already mentioned. Commissioner Spitzoff brought up, so she is a professor, fine arts professor at the SUNY Oneonta Fine Arts Department. She mentioned a initiative at SUNY called Regaining Momentum, which has to do with student and community collaboration. She said that there's potentially some funding available. She said that the art department and the English department were both very interested in the idea of partnering with the Public Arts Commission. They didn't know that the Public Arts Commission existed. And so there may be some involvement there, which I was really excited about. That's why I got really excited at the beginning, because I think that, you know, going into this with the Public Arts Commission, there wasn't necessarily the expectation. There was the hope, but not the expectation that the schools would be involved in collaboration in that way. But it sounds like this is a really promising way for that to come to fruition, and there are some faculty members from Hartwick as well on the commission, and so we're going to try to tie in Hartwick too, so that'll be really good. We talked about the Poet Laureate. Commissioner Spitzoff was also taking a lead on that. She has done some research on other Poet Laureate programs, Also mentioned the idea of like a mentorship, like a senior poet laureate and a junior poet laureate would be someone who's under 18. Which has, you know, really great possibilities for schools, but also that's sort of like a, you know, the poet laureate, one of the qualifications is that they're a published poet. And so being able to mentor someone younger from our community who has an interest in that, in, you know, what it's like to be a published poet, is kind of cool. So I'm excited about that. We talked about marketing the mural on the Ford Sales Building. James has been doing a really great job creating content around it. He's always filming when he's painting. He takes a lot of really great photos and he's putting it all out on the internet, and it's all, you know, public and shareable, and that's great. And so we kind of talked about ways that we can, you know, maybe come up with a hashtag, maybe be a little bit more strategic about how the city is marketing the mural. I think the mayor has done a really great job of kind of sticking to this narrative of like, come visit it. It's only gonna be up for a little while, come shop, come dine. And so I wanted to get the commission involved in that conversation. And then we also brought it back to James, who has a couple of ideas as well. So that more on that. And then Commissioner Vitolo mentioned the artist lofts, and just in general that that's going to be a great influx of artists into our community. How do we get them involved in the commission, etc. That commission kind of blossomed, or that conversation kind of blossomed into, you know, becoming a community that supports its artists through public art and etc. And being a really great community for artists. So that was it. They're always quick. It was only 45 minutes. All that in 45 minutes. So.
Comments, questions, Lynn?
Utility boxes, are you talking about the box like communication boxes? Or the green electrical?
Yeah, like green electrical boxes. Like we have one in the parking lot actually that Commissioner Spitzoff and I noticed on the way out. I was like, that has to be our first one. Actually it's a set of 3, but yeah, all of those like big, you know, transformer boxes and utility boxes and phone boxes and any sort of electrical gray, you know, metal boring box.
So then we have to get the utilities to sign off on that?
Correct, but they do it in other municipalities like all the time. So the city of Rochester is a really great example. They're all over the place out there. And so it's kind of it has a precedent in other places. Something that they do. Yeah.
Other questions, comments? All right,
I'm
well,
ready for 'em.
we're not letting you go. Would you give us the
I would.
report then on Parks and Rec?
Love to. So I was not present for the Parks and Rec meeting, so these are all notes from the YouTube, which you could watch and probably get more from my bullet points. But so Parks and Rec met, and I don't have the date in front of me because I left that off my notes, but it was the first Monday of the month, and we had a few petitioners. So we did actually cancel I wouldn't call him a petitioner, but the guest who was supposed to come from the Grand Glorious, because it seemed like no one was going to be able to be there, and I was sick, so I wasn't even going to be able to be there to represent the council. But Parks Administrator Lansing is happy to do, you know, any liaising that needs to happen there if anybody has any specific questions. We did have a couple of petitioners. So Robin Medina, who lives on Union Street, came with regard to the Wilbur Park play space / basketball court. She and supposedly several of her neighbors are still having some issues with noise there. Yeah, sort of more on that TBD. The commission sort of mentioned that they would like to see what the results of the survey are before we go anywhere with that space. Let's see, representative from Alpha Epsilon Pi came. They wanted to have a pig roast in the large pavilion of Wilbur Park. That is not possible. What they wanted to do was like bring a pig in over an open flame at like 10 o'clock the night before, let it cook all night, and then like eat in the park the next day. Which sounds fun, but is not allowed. So They were granted use of the pavilion, just to eat the following day, but they have to roast the pig somewhere else. We had Mike, who's a representative from the NICA bike race. They are a 9th season returning user. They basically ride through the parks. It's along the track. It's a big youth bike race. Let's see, Parks Administrator Lansing gave her report, with regard to leather stocking baseball, who's reserved 21 dates on field 6, which is the field that's on the agenda tonight for the $50,000 repair. Telephones in the Wind, which I reported on a couple times, Bernadette Wintersbell. They met with Public Works and Lou and Bernadette all went, and that seems to be moving forward. They've figured out a location. Lou did make a suggestion. Lou really loves pickleball, and so she mentioned potentially adding pickleball courts instead of the family play space. She gave us follow-up on a benefit. Oh, Kevin Harrington came maybe 2 meetings ago and discussed wanting to have a benefit for Ukraine in Ewok Park, but he ended up going forward with Foothills instead, so that's not happening in the park. Lou mentioned that she's trying to squeeze in the fishing derby on one Saturday in August. Let's see, there was no dog park update. The large park is open for all dogs and the small park is closed until needed repairs can be made, but there aren't any, there aren't any updates on that with regard for a timeline. And then someone named Mary Margaret from the Cooperstown Tennis Club made a request to hold an event for kids from Southport, right? It's tennis related, and that was approved. And then they also just briefly discussed the survey, the big takeaways from the survey. So we got the data from the survey. I haven't talked about this with you guys. We got the data from the survey. My big takeaways, and Carrie is intimate with the survey, so please let me know if you got something else from this, is that people mostly really like the park kind of as it is. Sort of like a serene place in nature in the middle of the city, and they sort of said like, don't do anything with it. But there was a lot of interest in disc golf, which is where you like throw a frisbee into a basket that's attached to a tree. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. And then the other sort of overwhelming feedback was that they would like the folks who took the survey would like better restroom facilities. So the commission's gonna use that to develop a master plan for Neowa, and the master plan may be, let's see if we can put in disc golf and, rehabilitate some of the facilities that are there, but mostly be well enough alone. Yeah, so that's what I have to report. Yes.
Just clarify your last sentence for a master plan for Wilbur or for Neowa?
Did I say Neowa? I meant Wilbur. Yes, thank you. Neowa has one, which is why.
That's another question.
How's the dog park going?
That's not a question for me.
I can tell you.
Okay, good.
I've been, but
I spent an inordinate amount of time on the dog park.
Any forward movement on Councilmember Davies' bike track?
oh, good
You guys were
question.
gonna take a look at that, right?
We haven't had anything really to do with that at Parks and Rec, aside from the initial sort of suggestion.
Oh,
I don't know,
I
Art,
thought
would
they
you
were.
like to-
Yeah, they reviewed it. Where we are at is we're trying to kind of create a relationship between a nonprofit that was willing to kind of support it and the City of Oneonta. They're interested, or they're concerned about liability and maintenance, so if we can get those two pieces addressed, then we need to turn our attention to raising the $10,000 to be able to develop the track and $5,000 for a maintenance plan moving forward, so 15 for all, so that is kind of actively going.
Yes, Dave. I've got a quick question. It might be more for Greg though. Has the fence, the gate at the end of Patel Park been repaired yet? That was a gate that was that people go through to go around to New Island.
Yeah, I don't believe it has yet. The gate's been removed. We've removed it permanently unless you guys want it installed.
We didn't have any intention of putting it back. Especially with the Greenway project we're gonna be doing through there.
Okay, I didn't know if there was a reason to keep it there or not.
I understand.
It's narrow enough to keep vehicles out.
Okay.
I do have one thing, if I can, on the dog park. The issue with the dog park and the drainage project that we were gonna be doing was materials. There was a delay in getting the materials, so there's a back order, and we're planning on probably not doing the drainage until probably the fall time.
Oh, okay. So are they gonna be, so what's the plan? Are we gonna reopen both?
So the plan is, I believe we're gonna open both eventually. We wanted to give the small dog park area a rest, get some grass to grow back because of all the use it was receiving. So that was the plan.
Okay. Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well,
If I could just reference really quickly, FYI, the race that Councilmember LaFarge, you mentioned that was approved took place this weekend, great success. There were hundreds of riders here from all over the state. Down in the city, all the way up the Adirondacks and west towards Buffalo, and it was well received, great course. Everyone's really interested in coming back next year as well.
Cool. Thanks, Bert.
Any other questions, comments? No, okay. In that event, if we could move to Councilmember Raptor and the legislative committee report.
The legislative committee met on May 9th. Basically, there were two. The first was a review of special use permits for Greek organizations. David Risford was brought up terms that had not really it was not following its agenda and not following its process that was appropriate to it. And that went to another discussion about zoning board, planning board. So we had a discussion a bit about the training that chair people and members of committees actually have. I know that from zoning, there's a requirement for annual training for any member of the committee, and whether or not that's being done is a bit in the air. So what we spoke about was the city administrator paying attention to that, looking into it, and then looking at what could be done. Training has often been something that you send people out to, sometimes with expenses that go with the city, but we also have resources inside the city, people who are employees at the city or working with us in other ways, and that some sort of active training and discussion about the role of the committees, how they're conducting their business, could actually be done with minimum costs. Well, not to say we couldn't use other outside resources that would be appropriate for us, but that was what that discussion was about for our commissions, and hearing about housing again, how they're mandated, how they're led, and what sort of role they perceive themselves as having. I'm not sure that hearing some of these, whether we're in good stead about being sure that committees are not working entirely to achieve their own bliss, so to speak. Now the other piece we talked about was having Hank Shepherd at Craig's facilitation, coming in and talking about our tax laws, or tax laws in general. There was nothing really to advise council on regarding that, but that was the other item on the agenda. Craig, if you have anything more, anything you want to say about his inputs?
I think there might be some more discussion warrants as far as what tax incentives, in particular, the city wants to really
Absolutely.
look at it. A little more analysis of financial impact goes and the impact on staff time, if there is any. That's probably something we should.
And that's something we have committees that would be able to take along for the one discussion and recommendations. So basically, that was the content of the meeting.
Question, Dave?
Yeah, not a question, more of, just want to piggyback on what John was saying. With the first issue with the special use permits, and as I had said to the council before, it came out of having two fraternities that within 5 minutes of the meeting almost had the special use permits given, when later we found out that there was a certificate of compliance had not been given yet. The police report hadn't been provided, there was no fire inspection yet. So I think as John was saying, it went into a conversation about educating the planning commission, and we talked about zoning commission also. And they have requirements every year, but who's monitoring that? We have no idea if it's being monitored, if the chair monitors or who, and it might just be a matter of somebody having a spreadsheet with the names of the people and what education they've had over the course of the year. I mean, it's pretty simple. But I think that needs to be the conversation that's got to be had with the chairs of those committees.
Yeah, just to bounce off of that, two commissions, planning and zoning, that training is required by the state. To speak in terms of our other commissions, they serve to advise council very much at their own discretion, how they conduct themselves and what they say, and whether or not we're paying great attention to that and getting the most out of the contributions of committee members. It's a question.
But I think that state training, John, as we talked before, is so important because of the impact it has on the safety of residents in the city, as well as the people that are coming before the board to either get variance or the special use permit or whatnot. So,
To know that they're trained.
know that they're trained and to make sure that they're making the right decisions so nobody gets hurt.
So Dave, is that something that the chairmans could turn over to the mayor, is the list of training for commissioners? Is that something, I like that spreadsheet idea, is that something?
I think that would be it makes most sense to me anyway, to have the chairs be responsible for that.
Right.
Because it's such a simple thing to do, and then just turn that over once a year to the mayor or to the city clerk. That way we have a document.
Because we're not stymieing them from taking the training.
No, not at all.
We don't wait a year for.
But I think they, when they agree to be on those committees or commissions, they agree to that type of training and to undergo that every year. And I think they should do their due diligence and provide the proof that they've done it.
And then we give the mayor a good check and balance of who's actually interested in being on those two very important commissions.
We may need to talk about then the mechanics of enforcement of producing that as an expectation on the of that.
Yeah.
Can have that conversation.
Yeah, in past years, when I was on zoning, there was a state conference, or there was a state training for planning and zoning. Usually involved going to a hotel, staying overnight. It was an expense to the city, but it was one of the ways that that people could meet with other folks who were in zoning or planning, hear professional presenters, cover a number of topics in a conference setting, typically two in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and it was very effective, and it professionalized, I think, members of zoning board. So and also the quality of, whoever is chairing has a big impact. Presumably it would be the best trained person, and I'm not sure how that's monitored now. So, enough said.
Any other comments or questions for John? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to Councilmember Davies for a second appearance with the community bonus and
So the Community Wellness Committee met last night. Recent. In our effort to try to understand a little more of the challenges that our community is facing, and different services that are out there, as well as some of the gaps in services, we've taken up several strategies. So one of those strategies has been inviting folks to our meetings and really can ask them some questions. So last night we had Dr. Ben Friedel come. He is a local healthcare practitioner and a volunteer at the community health clinic here in town. And that's primarily where he focused his comments. So we got to understand how this is staffed by local physicians and nursing physicians, and the entire gamut of folks volunteer to support this particular clinic. Tuesday nights it's open to folks. So I can skip a lot of kind of information. There's a lot of great information about that particular organization, but he talked about gaps in services, and I want to point these out. I think they're worth listening to. One, because it's a really big concern. It overlaps places. And the second, because I think there's a lot of connection with some of our other different groups. He felt the two biggest gaps right now in community kind of wellness and health is mental health care among children, especially with behavioral health issues. That there are no mental health providers for children in our area, which I thought was kind of stunning. We've heard that already once from one of our visitors, and we just heard that again last night. So that's something I think as a committee we need to begin thinking about. It's a huge gap. The other gap is, I'm going to say the obvious. We all know it ties into the Housing Commission, which is why that is so important that we have it up and running. One of the gaps that they have in terms of providing service for the community is that they cannot get primary care providers to this area. They cannot recruit them here. So we know this across different industries that we have a hard time recruiting people to this area. One of those particular issues is housing. There are many issues as well, but they face some of those same problems. We also then heard from, there was a correspondence of, it's a member of the local community sent a letter to the mayor who copied several sent to address it. And I just really feel like it's important to address this. The letter centered around a conversation that this particular person had with an elected official, not from the city, higher than the city, exact quotes, higher than the city, who talked about busloads of homeless people being brought into Oneonta and dropped off. And I've been hearing this rumor for years. You hear it all around. Our chief of police was there, and they certainly are very close to the situation. They're working with people in the community all the time, and they've heard nothing to support that particular rumor. I think this is becoming kind of an urban myth. It's become an urban legend that keeps perpetuating. So I put that out there to say that there is no evidence at this point that that is taking place. We also heard about some concerns from local business folks about the walkway between Main Street and the parking garage, something we are certainly well aware of. One of our other methods for trying to understand what's going on within the community is that we are surveying our local providers of different services. And Councilmember Murphy has been did a great job writing the survey and getting it out to our different organizations. We've heard back from quite a few folks at this point. We're hoping to hear back from more. And we're going to be using that information to try to understand kind of overlap, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, so that we can have a community wellness summit in August, in which we'll bring all these groups in and talk about the gaps and what's needed and the overlap, and try to think about how we might be able to move forward strategically so that we can address some of these particular issues. I think that is pretty much the evening there.
Questions, comments?
Just a quick one. Have you guys got any information on how our homeless shelter is being used, and if it's like statistics, like is it full, is it not full, is it?
Oh, the warming station there?
No, I'm talking about the homeless shelter down off of Pew Street.
I don't have the information on that. So I haven't been part of our discussion, so sorry, look over at Chief.
The homeless shelter is run by Doctrines, it's not a city.
Right, I didn't know if they were gonna be invited in, or if you talked to them at all to see about what they're facing.
We are certainly reaching out to everybody. OFO is one of those groups that are on our list, and we certainly have been talking with their folks there. So we will continue to try to interface with everybody. But we've heard more information about the warming station is going to try. We haven't had any more details about the home shelter.
And I'll just add to that, if I may, Mark, that OFO was one of the respondents to the survey so far. We're closing the survey within a month's time. So I'll make sure that anybody who's interested, it's in the meeting minutes, but anybody who's interested in seeing the results of that survey, just let me know.
Any other questions?
I could just add, if you don't mind, Mark, to the warming station, I know the Catholic Charities, along with Main Street Baptist and other organizations are moving forward for this year because they saw quite a need. I guess there was almost every single night they were turning somebody or somebody's away because it just wasn't enough room. Again, that's just temporary. They're only supposed to be in there 4 to 5 hours and then they have to exit, so.
Right, and they have some folks that they bar them from coming in because of behavioral issues, so we have, we certainly have need there, we have needs in other places as well. Recognizing that certainly.
That point that you brought up about no mental health professionals for our children is kind of concerning. I didn't realize that we had that gap.
Yeah, I think it was a four county, is that what Dr. Brown said? And I don't know what the role we play, but that we're aware of it, and I think this becomes a point at the summit we begin to try to address is something we need to do. And I guess, what I understand is that issue has been increasing, obviously due to the pandemic and the stress that that's put on young people, and the shift of learning that many young people have had to go through.
Other questions or comments from all? Thank you very much. And then moving on to Councilmember Carson and the Finance and Human Resources Committee report.
Thank you, Mayor. We met May 9th. For you, tonight's agenda is motions 4 through 9. Consent. Chief Knapp on motion number 7 has been trying to pre-plan and stagger on his equipment. In this particular case, Chief Knapp is feel free to jump in. The turnout gear needs to meet certain standards and found out through inspection that the gear wasn't meeting those standards. So instead of trying to stagger on a schedule, which would have been more cost effective, we're at this point where we need to purchase turnout gear for all of the firefighters because the gear was found to be deficient. So that's the reason for this increase. If you remember back in our budget discussion talks, Chief Knapp had brought up that schedule and trying to bring it through on a different year so we weren't hit with it one time. He did explain why we're here on this. I know we asked the question about fuel costs rising with the contract. City staff gave their explanation that they have a good solid contract that's before us. Hank Shepherd came and talked about the county taking over for the remainder of this year, the assessor's role. That's in motion number 4, and a specific individual was motion number 5. The AWAS relocation replacement is now up for you. Motion number 9 is some budgetary items that need to be moved in, and then what's kind of exciting is motion number 11, where we have some additional funds moving into our general fund line items that Jenny and Greg have been working on. And as you can see, this helps out folks like Chris, shift more. It was 150,000 we put into the streets and sidewalk. That's what we did. It says 175. So we are getting a little bit ahead. What's nice to see is that we're actually putting money back into these line items rather than continuing to take them out. And for me, because I'm a little bit of a geek, I like the fact that we're starting an IT reserve fund, being proactive instead of reactive. That's our general discussion of 12, and 13 was the Park County Reserve Fund. Budget talks last year, Jenny and Greg came before us and said that was one of their revenue streams that they were looking at. So this is just getting some seed money down in there. And as you can see, with the 100,000 there, the 100,000 for the IT reserve, and the rest of the money back in motion number 11. We start to see where the city is moving in a positive direction. But as Jenny and Greg will keep telling us, we need to have more revenue streams so that we're not always dependent on. Try to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? Very good. So thank you very much, Len. And now on to our city administrator. Thank you, Mayor.
As I think probably everyone is aware, Preservation League of New York State dedicated downtown Manhattan Historic District on their 2022-23 seventh state list. We're for putting that application together on our behalf, and just a quick blurb from the website, if you're not aware of what the Preservation League is doing. They've been helping New York State counties retain and reuse threatened sites through its 7 Save Endangered Sites program since 1999. They're building on partnerships with groups and individuals. And key catalyst to the successful revival of dozens of buildings, landscapes, downtown neighborhoods endangered by threats such as lack of regulatory protections, neglect, and demolition, and incompatible development. In our case, downtown historic district has several threats that it's facing in one capacity or another, which is demolition of derelict buildings, deterioration of older buildings that are perhaps vacant, and the general lack of public awareness of the value of maintaining historic structures. So, we're hopeful that this opportunity will kind of shed more light on our historic district. And, Stephen, want to jump in, feel free, or if you'd like to watch, I think it was WKTV. I think Stephen was on tonight. They came and did an interview. So right off the bat, it's helping to get the word out about our historic district. And hopefully we'll be able to do some things to revitalize some of these old vacant buildings over the next year. OFD and OPD, police and fire staff, are leading annual training on various topics for city employees throughout this week. Basically, all city employees are attending one-day training at the public safety building on topics including respiratory protection, bloodborne pathogens, hazmat, right to know, workplace violence, active shooter, etc. Trainings that some of which hadn't been done during the pandemic, so we'll go back on track. We'll update Glenwood Creek culvert replacement projects. The right-of-way acquisition phase, as they are wanted to, has taken longer than we would have hoped. We are just now about complete with that. We've got agreements with all the 4 property owners whose property will be impacted either during construction or permanently in some small respects by this culvert replacement. But because of the timeline, we're likely, DOT will move into the bidding phase for construction, but lead time for getting a culvert manufactured and produced, we're not going to likely be able to install that this year. It'll most likely be installed in 2020. So it is moving forward, although unfortunately slower. Just to follow up on the Suncrest water issue we talked about earlier, just crunching some quick numbers. That'd be about a $2 million project at least to replace what is roughly a mile of water main on Suncrest Terrace, College Terrace, and Overwood Drive, including the water services to each of the houses along there. It wouldn't make sense to just replace a section of these folks' house. There have been issues that have been shifting over the years, as we discussed a little bit earlier. It's really something, if we're going to do a project there, we should look at doing the whole neighborhood. That's something that if there were funding dedicated, we could complete that project within a year. New York State DOT funding. So every year we get the CHIPS funding, Consolidated Highway Improvement Program funding we get from the state. There's a portion, annual portion based on our lane miles of streets in the city. This year we're getting the same as we did last year, $330,000 roughly. The state budget also included continuation of several programs that have not been around as long as CHIPS, but in recent years we have received from the Pave NY program is under $91,000. The Extreme Winter Recovery Program, another $63,000. The big one is the state touring route programs for another $740,000. The state touring route is a state route, such as in our city, 7 and 23, which are designated state routes that are on city-owned and maintained roads, such as Chestnut Street in the city and Main Street from Chestnut Street to the east end. So simply having those streets in our city based on that mileage, and we're able to get an additional $740,000, which we got for the first time last year, and that's been renewed this year. So that's a big help to our ability to maintain our streets. And also a new program, Pave Our Potholes program, that's another $61,000 roughly. So with this year's apportionment and the rollover funds that we didn't spend from previous years, we're saving for some bigger projects. We have uncommitted right now about $1.5 million to commit to various projects. And Chris and John Williams, the whole first team are together, a list of priorities they have already. We're working on cost estimates and seeing what we're going to be doing this year and what. So just to give you a little good news. As far as the state budget definitely helped us out in regard to street paving. That was all I had. Questions?
That 741,000, is that based on lineal feet of street, or is that the city size? I mean, how is that number determined by DOT?
So DOT, my understanding is it's a total project or program budget, and then that number is based, it's calculated the same way CHIPS is calculated, but and for those cities, municipalities that have touring routes within them. So I'm assuming it's based on our lineal feet of touring route within the city, a portion of that.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. And with that, having already given my remarks at the top of the meeting, I'll move into the consent agenda. And we'll start with number one, motion to approve the minutes. Motion that the common council approves the minutes of the regular meeting held May 3rd, 2022. Number two, approval of warrants. Motion that the common council approves the warrants totaling $296,627.63, and that the same be placed on the Director of Finance's desk for payment as presented. Number three, that the common council concurs with the mayor's recommendations and approves the following appointment with City Commission, Civil Service Commission, Russ Southern. May 31st, 2026 will be his expiration date. Motion number four, that the common council authorizes the mayor to enter into a one-year services agreement with the county of Otsego for the period from January 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2022 for the provision of assessor services with a charge of $35,290 per year for 2022 as presented. This item subject to review by the city attorney. Motion number five, that the common council designates Pamela Dingold, I'm afraid I'm killing her last name. Dingold, sorry about that, Pamela. Pamela Dingold, a member of the County Real Property Tax Service Office staff, to act as the sole appointed assessor for the city in connection with the city's contract for assessment services with the County of Otsego. My apologies again. Motion number six, that the common council authorizes the mayor to sign a two-year contract with the Southside Mall, Oneonta, for a term of January 1, 2022 to December 31, 2023 for continued provision of Oneonta public transit services to the Southside Mall in the town of Oneonta for $600 per month or $7,200 annually. This item is subject to review by the city attorney. Motion number seven, that the common council authorizes a budget amendment, the fire department's budget for the purchase of firefighter turnout gear, increasing code A3410-2R from $61,200 to $102,200 by increasing the appropriation of the public safety reserve by $41,000. And pursuant to the provisions of general municipal law of the state of New York, the common council approved an expenditure of $102,200 from the general public safety reserve to be used toward the purchase of 26 firefighter turnout gear sets pursuant to state contract 23054. Number eight, that the common council approves the following resolution. New York State Department of Transportation Aviation Project Funding Agreement, Replacement and Relocation of AWAS. Whereas the city of Oneonta submitted a grant application dated August 13, 2020 to the New York State Department of Transportation for the replacement and relocation of AWAS at the Albert S. Nader Regional Airport. And whereas the New York State Department of Transportation has approved of $1 million with the city, a grant of $900,000 for said project, requiring a local match of 10% or $100,000. And whereas consistent and in furtherance of the resolution heretofore made by the Commons Council of the City of Oneonta on April 21, 2020, the city desires to advance the project by committing funds for the local match in the amount of $100,000. And whereas the city of Oneonta and the state of New York have heretofore entered into an agreement which authorizes the undertaking of the project and the payment of the state share for the project, now therefore be it resolved that in furtherance of the actions heretofore authorized by Common Council of the city of Oneonta, a capital budget for said project not to exceed $1 million is hereby authorized, and be it further resolved that all necessary budget amendments and transfers for said local share are hereby authorized, and be it further resolved that the mayor is hereby authorized to execute all necessary agreements on behalf of the city of Oneonta, and be it further resolved that the resolution shall take effect immediately. And motion number 9, that the Common Council approves 2021 budget adjustments to fund the final project costs for the Lower Reservoir Dam Improvement Project as follows. From F8340 464 water T&D purchase services $10,228. From F8330 464 water purification purchased services $2,001. To F9950.9 transferred to capital projects $12,229. And the council further authorizes the final Lower Reservoir Dam Improvement Capital Project as follows, bringing the total project cost to $1,400,397, increasing H45.8320.21 Lower Reservoir Dam Improvements $10,228, increasing H45.8320.25 bond insurance costs $2,001, increasing H45.5031 transfers from other funds $12,229. And that concludes the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to? No, I'm sorry. I do that every single time just to see who's awake. Do we have anybody here that would like to remove an item from our agenda? Okay. Number 8. Any others to be removed? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve? Mark and I have John. Okay.
Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Yes.
Councilmember Whisper.
Yes.
Councilmember Frenchman.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Henry.
Yes.
Councilmember Webb.
Yes.
Okay. So we have motion 8. I have a motion to approve. Thank you very much. Scott, followed by Luke and Katie, who are the one that pulled this.
I did. We had a discussion about this in a presentation actually from Councilmember Person in his role at the airport to explain this project and the timing and its merit. And basically all I wanted to do was ask where that $100,000 local match, like what fund that's coming from. Before I go on it.
That's the general fund balance.
It is, okay. That's all, that was my question.
Okay. Any further discussion? Do I have a motion? No, I already have this. All right, no further discussion. Can I please have the vote?
Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Yes.
Councilmember Whisper.
Yes.
Councilmember Frenchman.
No,
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Henry.
Yes.
Councilmember Webb.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on now to motion number 10 for discussion. That the common council approves the purchasing agent's recommendation and awards the request for qualifications RFQ for professional design services and construction administration for Market Street Transportation Improvement Projects to Wendell WD Architecture Engineering rather, Surveying and Landscape Architecture, PC, Williamsville, New York, in the amount of $1,901,526, subject to the review of the city attorney, and further authorizes the mayor to execute the contract, and further authorizes the creation of the capital project budget being funded by a combination of grant proceeds as administered by the New York State Department of State, Empire State Development, and the New York State Department of Transportation, also by any required local match, and further authorizes any necessary budget amendments and transfers, and to take any actions and provide any additional information that may be required to implement the proposed program, subject to review by the city attorney. Do I have a motion to approve? So it's Katie, and so with that, do we have discussion?
Just a quick clarifying question, since funding is on my mind. So the 1.9, Greg and Vic shared some figures with us in email. This would come out of that total amount. Yeah, does that make any sense? This $1.9 million for,
Oh, yeah, okay, so I know your question.
okay,
The total current project funding for this collection project, not just the engineering design and construction administration, but also for construction, is roughly $8.9 million. This $1.9 million contract for design and construction administration services would come out of that.
okay. So we would have roughly $6 million.
Yes.
Okay.
Further discussion?
So, Greg, realistically, what are you anticipating we'll be able to accomplish? I mean, I think every one of us, we want to move forward on this, but now we're down to 6 million. To be honest with you, I didn't anticipate 1.9 this part. I read your email, but 20% seems to be a lot for that type of service. And the fact that we only had one, right? We only had one that bid on it. You feel confident that that is literally the best price that we could have gotten, and then with a limited amount of funds, I know you guys are shaking trees, but what are we gonna really get accomplished for 6 million?
Yeah, so our estimate in-house was somewhere between 1.8 and 2.2 million for that. So we think it's within that range of what we expect. Now, I can't say if someone else had submitted a proposal that it could, it might have been lower. This isn't the type of procurement where you necessarily go with the low bid. It's a qualifications-based process. I explained the email, but just for everyone's knowledge, we seek proposals based on people's qualifications. We rate them, choose what we feel the city selection team is the most qualified firm for the project. Then we ask them, that most qualified firm, to submit a price to us that we then evaluate for reasonableness. If it's reasonable, we ask them to move forward. If not, we would go back to the next firm and talk about a price with them. Just to be that clear. But I do believe that this firm, which is the same firm that did our conceptual planning study for us, is well qualified to do this work. They certainly understand, it was right in our RFQ, what our budget is for the project, so they understand our limitations. The scope of work, we're going to be looking at two paths. What can we do with our current funding, and if there's more we'd like to do that maybe we need to phase and try to do in future projects, how do we go about doing that? So I can't say for certain what we're going to be able to do exactly. We're certainly aiming for option one in the conceptual plan, which is to install or build a new transit facility at our building within a portion of the parking garage or just in front of it. And out in front of Market Street is where the transit, bus bays would be for OLT and trailways just down the street from that. And then the other portion of the project is streetscape improvements on Market Street. I think we're likely to get improvements being constructed as part of this project from Main Street down to the parking garage area where the bus bays are. I don't see us going all the way down to South Main Street or beyond like we'd like to do eventually, but given there's a lot of vacant land there's hopefully new development going to happen at some point in the future there. Those are things that can be phased in the future. I think if we need to reduce scope based on budget that's available, the first thing we might reduce would be the streetscape project, I think. That's something that we consider if it comes down to that, we can't get additional funding. As Len suggested, we are seeking and are submitting grant applications to additional, for additional funding for this project. Hopefully we're successful, but we can't guarantee that. Which is why there's a two-pronged approach to look at what can we afford and what would we like to do, and we'll get as much done as we can. But I think the transit center, transit hub, moving the buses off of Main Street, and obviously the parking garage, structural rehabilitations, and restoring that to the facility that you want to park your car and feel comfortable parking in, and taking care of some of the basic necessities there are the priorities.
Any further questions? Jenny? You have a hand?
I just wanted to mention, if it was all right, even though that we only had one bid submitted for the RFQ, we did have over 33 interested parties download the information. And as part of the state grant requirement, we have to document why the other parties did not submit. And a number of them were just saying that they did not have the staff, they did not have the partners that were needed to be able to give us the city good service. So I don't want you to think there was just one interested party, there were actually 33.
Very good. Let's step back for a second, Greg. I just want to make sure I got the monies right in my head. There's none of the monies that we're talking about is to finish tearing down the old only on sales building, right?
That's correct.
This is just strictly transit hub and the streetscape of Market Street. Does that include going down that Chestnut Street extension where that wall is part of that building?
No.
Or is that part of the
No,
Oleana?
the streetscape would be, Market Street from Main Street down to basically Water Street Extension. There's also some improvements intended for Water Street Extension, having better pedestrian and bicycle access up through Main Street via what we're calling the Muller Plaza Passageway, which is that sidewalk that goes around the 4-block building to Muller Plaza. Part of this project, intended to open that up, improve it.
Just because I can just see some confusion, because we got like 2 or 3 different projects going there all at one time. And I just want to, so questions start getting asked that I can answer the right way, not the wrong way.
So you're clear on it.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Roseberry?
Yes.
Councilmember LaFarge?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Upton?
Yes,
Very good. All right, motion 11, that the common council approves the following additions to the general fund reserve accounts: public safety reserve, $200,000. Highway equipment, $150,000. Streets and sidewalks, $175,000. Parks and recreation, $50,000, and repairs, $50,000. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And then seconded by Dave Risberger. And discussion. All right. Clerk will call the roll.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davis?
Yes.
Councilmember Roseberry?
Yes.
Councilmember LaFarge?
Aye.
Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Upton?
yes,
Motion number 12, that the common council approves the following resolution. Whereas pursuant to section 6C of the general municipal law as amended, hereby establishes a capital reserve fund to be known as the IT Reserve Fund, hereinafter Reserve Fund. The purpose of this reserve fund is to accumulate monies to finance the cost of a type of capital improvement. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the type of capital improvement to be financed is all or part of the cost of construction, reconstruction, acquisition, or betterment of the capital improvement, including any physical improvement and any related preliminary costs, furnishings, equipment, machinery, or apparatus for any physical improvement acquired at the time when such improvement is constructed, reconstructed, or acquired, and be it further resolved that the Director of Finance is hereby directed to deposit $100,000 and secure the monies of this reserve fund in the manner provided by section 10 of the general municipal law, that the city of Oleana, the Director of Finance, may invest the monies in the reserve fund in the manner provided by section 11 of the general municipal law and consistent with the investment policy of the city of Oneonta, that any interest earned or capital gains realized on the monies so deposited or invested shall accrue to and become part of the reserve fund. And the director of finance shall account for the reserve fund in a manner which maintains the separate identity of the cash and investments of the reserve fund. And be it further resolved that except as otherwise provided by section 6C of the general municipal law, expenditures from this reserve fund shall be made only for the purpose for which the reserve fund is established, and that no expenditure shall be made from this reserve fund without approval of this common council and without such additional actions or proceedings as may be required by section 6C of the general municipal law, including a permissive referendum if required by subdivision 4 of section 6C. Do I have a motion to approve? I've got Mark Davies and I've got Lenny Carson. And discussion. No discussion. Yes. Discussion.
Just wanted to thank Greg and Jenny for getting these going. I was part of the ideas of getting some revenues, extra revenues in the city. So thank you both for putting it together.
Thank you. Any further comments or discussion? Call the roll.
Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Leland.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitford.
Yes.
Councilmember LaFarge.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrison.
Yes.
Councilmember
Yes.
Right. Motion number 13, that the common council approves the following resolution. Whereas pursuant to section 6C of the general municipal law as amended, hereby establishes a capital reserve fund to be known as the parking reserve fund, hereinafter reserve fund. The purpose of this reserve fund is to accumulate monies to finance the cost of the type of capital improvement. Now therefore be it resolved that the type of capital improvement to be financed is all or part of the cost of construction, reconstruction, acquisition, or betterment of the capital improvements, including any physical improvement and any related preliminary costs, furnishings, equipment, machinery, or apparatus for any physical improvement acquired at the time when such improvement is constructed, reconstructed, or acquired, and be it further resolved that the director of finance is hereby directed to deposit $100,000 and secure the monies of this reserve fund in the manner provided by section 10 of the general municipal law, that the city of Oneonta director of finance may invest the monies in the reserve fund in the manner provided by section 11 of the general municipal law and consistent with the investment policy of the city of Oneonta, that any interest earned or capital gains realized on the money so deposited or invested shall accrue to and become part of the reserve fund. And the director of finance shall account for the reserve fund in a manner which maintains the separate identity of the cash and investments of the reserve fund. And be it further resolved that except as otherwise provided by section 6C of the general municipal law, expenditures from this reserve fund shall be made only for the purpose for which the reserve fund is established, and that no expenditure shall be made from this reserve fund without approval of this common council and without such additional actions or proceedings as may be required by section 6C of the general municipal law, including a permissive referendum if required by subdivision 4 of section 6C. Do I have a motion to approve? Luke Murphy, followed by Katie LaFarge. Do we have discussion?
This is a question. So in the first be it resolved, we're talking about the types of things that this can be spent on. And I know that we had mentioned that we will need to do a survey and that, or a study, and that this fund, I think the intention is to help fund that study. Is that correct? I'm sorry. I'm asking.
No, I understand what you're asking. I'm not sure on the study, if it would come out of this reserve fund or not. I'll get back to you on that answer, okay?
Okay, and so, I mean, obviously the change to our parking, you know, we're putting $100,000 in there. There's something that will be able to use this money on. I just was wondering if that original intention would be able to.
I think where it says in any preliminary costs,
Oh.
construction projects with the engineering, soft costs, those kind of things. that might Be a study that. may or may not occur.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Further discussion?
Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Councilmember LaFerge.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember.
Yes.
Now, number 14, and I want to recognize and thank folks who are representing FOF and the Greenway for your patience sitting through fairly long council meeting, for being here. Meanwhile, Park pedestrian paths bid awards and funding options. Begin our discussion of that. Greg, you want to pick that up?
Sure. So as you know, the city had moved ARPA funding to several parks projects. Our ARPA funds from 2021 totaling around $713,000. We prioritized the list of parks improvement projects. Number 2 on this list was our Newell Park pedestrian paths improvements. So there's an existing footpath that runs along the mill race between Newell Place, which is by the Parks Maintenance Building, and James Jordan, which is getting off of Market Street. We'd like to pave. Add some areas for benches to possibly be installed in the future. One of the options that we'll consider tonight is adding a little bit of a guide rail along that section. This would also pave the path, so there's a paved path along the race now from James Jorgensen heading toward Catella Park. It stops just before you get to the underpass and then Lettuce Highway. This would extend that under the underpass and then cross the street and go along the footpath that's beaten down now in grass along Catella Park, along the Lettuce Highway right-of-way fence to the existing gate. There's no longer a gate to the new line bike trails and foot trails. So this would, improve that. I think the idea would, the Greenway Commission jump in at some point if they'd like, and Al as well with FOF, Chris. They're very enthusiastic about improving these trails, and we agree with the city that improving these sort of trails, it's really a strength of the city, our recreation and our quality of life. Things like this that we can do to improve those, I think are gonna go a long way towards making people want to live here. As far as the actual bid, we had originally estimated around $150,000 for just the paving portion of the work. We knew it would be a little bit higher than that when we added in some things like crosswalks at the either end, and we've looked at these alternates such as the fence along the mill race in one section, and also adding a little bit more paving at one end, and then in another alternate to consider milling and paving the existing paved path. We have these printed out in front of you. So there are 3 options that we're asking you to consider tonight, with possibly a twist. So,
I have one question. Can you explain the Neola Park main drive sidewalk? I'm trying to picture where you're talking about.
so this is one of it's actually on the bottom of the list of priorities for use of the ARPA funds. This project that we're talking about tonight wouldn't exhaust our ARPA funds. There are more projects to come in the future that haven't been designed or aren't ready to be built yet. So what Dave's asking about the Newell Park main drive sidewalk, that's when I say main drive, that's James Dorson Ave, which turns into Bertus Lauren Drive, which turns into Newell Place. So basically going from Market Street all the way over to River Street. Installing a sidewalk along that section where there isn't now. There is one along Newell Place and at Greenway Circle. So to install a sidewalk along there, I think would be a good first step in improving that main drive would be more pedestrian friendly. That, by depending on how much we spend on these higher priority ARPA projects, it's likely that we're gonna have nothing available through ARPA to spend on that sidewalk, which is on the sheet you have. That's why that number is showing red. That's the number that's being negatively affected by increasing the amount that we need to fund for this Newell pathway. That answer your question.
Well, it did. I'm looking at 3 options, and I also noticed that 2 of the options, if 2 of these options have that sidewalk in there, but there's a $50,000 difference between them to do the sidewalk, which I find interesting.
Right, so an option A, which is to do just the base bid. So I guess to quickly go through that again, the base bid is paving the new trail where it's not paved now. The first alternate that was included in our bid that we put out was for that guide rail along the Norris Wood area, which is not necessary. It would be nice to have. It's not something that we would recommend doing now. We think we could do it in the future, possibly less expensive if we did that in-house or maybe partnering with someone like Job to install it. It wouldn't be something we could accomplish this year, but maybe in a future year if it were funded. The second alternate that was considered, that was milling and paving, right, sir?
Correct.
That was milling and paving the existing paved pathway, just having a nice new surface. We don't think that's 100% necessary right now. It will be in the future. It'd be nice to have a completely restored pathway along the entire length.
It was disturbed during the construction of the sewer line there, so we felt doing an alternate just to see what the price would be to make it a nice, clean, smooth path without any, pavement patches in it.
And then the third alternate would be where the gate was at the end of Catella Park. There's a short section of compacted gravel that goes up to the Lettuce Highway sidewalk that goes to New Island. That wasn't included in the base bid to be paved. It's okay as it is, but again, it'd be nice to finish that pavement right up to the sidewalk. So that's alternate 3. The funding for the base bid doesn't include any of the alternates. That's option A. That would total budget would need to be $270,000 for that. Option B, which is what we would recommend, is a total budget of $320,000, and that includes alternates 2 and 3. In addition to the base bid. And then option C is to do everything that would add in all 3 alternates, that's including the guide rail. And that would require a $355,000 budget. We had originally intended or budgeted before we really did design and had an updated estimate to use $100,000 from ARPA and the $50,000 donation from Future for Renown Foundation, which obviously is very generous to make that donation. And we accepted that at previous council meetings. That was a $150,000 budget. So to do any of these options, we need to spend a little more city funding. So for option A, we would be spending $136,000 from ARPA funds, plus the $50,000 from FOF. And then there's a Greenway Reserve, which we have available. There's $84,000 in that reserve. This reserve, I believe these funds came from an old grant project that weren't entirely expended from the early 2000s, intended solely for Greenway improvements as part of the Greenway. It would be an eligible expense. It's not something that we spend on often. We do have some annual maintenance costs with mowing, that sort of thing. Nothing that we would, if we were to spend this $84,000, we would be able to continue doing those annual maintenance items without any issues. So that's something that we can consider, and you see that listed in all 3 of these options. Now, we did check with the Greenway Commission, committee, and they asked if, could we maybe leave a little bit in that fund, at least $10,000. We were considering maybe 14,000 in there might be another option where you spend, take $14,000 out of there. You would have to spend an additional $14,000 from ARPA to leave a little bit left over. They have some other plans in the upcoming years. They want to do a study of the existing trestle bridge that there used to be a trail across that's been closed off. They were concerned about the structural integrity of the bridge, and they want to do a study to see what it would take to rehabilitate that or replace it, or what are their options. And that's, I wouldn't say long-term, but a relatively near-term plan to extend the Greenway Trail, paved pathway all the way out through New Island, and eventually to Fort Park would be the goal. So they've asked if we could ask the council to consider that. So if you look at each of these options, A, B, and C, you could look at 3 different options where you would see that Greenway Reserve reduced to 70, and in option A, ARPA would go up to 150. option B, we'll spend 70 from Greenway, 200 from Martha. And option C, 70 from Greenway, 235 from Martha. So that's the other wrinkle. I guess at this point, does everyone understand the options that are available? I'm happy to answer questions. I know it's a lot.
So council, questions, discussion on this, Mark Davis?
Thanks, Greg. So I heard you say that you all are feeling that option B is a better option. And Chris's comment about basically having this pavement all the way through. Explain to me a little bit more why that you think that's important. Is that going to be an issue later on with kind of that area popping or beginning to break up? What's the thinking behind rebuilding and paving that entire section?
Essentially that, and Chris, you've looked at it closer than I have recently. Your thoughts about the issue?
There was, we just recently constructed the sewer line there, replacement, and there's excavator tracks and dig outs from the construction, so there's patching all through that, and we felt taking that out and putting down a full clean layer of material would be a better option. If we didn't do that, it would still last. You'd have patches, they may break off, you have to possibly patch them periodically over the years, but we could work with what's there. Just to be a nicer, cleaner project, we could do a whole new service.
Yeah, I think we were thinking that's, geographically, we're done now in this section, and we're gonna be looking forward in the future, just spending any additional Greenway money on, pushing out into wildland, not have to come back anytime and do those scenarios.
Right. Further questions?
So where are you asking from us today?
We'd like to have the council, we have motions prepared for each of these options. If there's an option you want to proceed with and authorize funding budget for tonight, we can proceed.
I think the only thing that I would say is that I know that previously we've had some conversation around how we'd like to spend this ARPA funding. And I think that it might behoove us to take a comprehensive look at how we'd like to spend the rest of the money before we decide. I know that we prioritize things for a reason. Council didn't necessarily take place in that prioritization. So I don't know if anyone else is interested in just kind of seeing where we stand with like the rest of the funding and what we might want those projects to look like before we decide what we want to do with this project. I'm really excited about this for the accessibility aspect. I think it's fantastic, and I'm excited to see it go forward. It's changed a lot, I think, since in terms of city commitment, since it was first brought to Parks and Rec. Maybe that was in the fall or early this year, where it was sort of the suggestion was that it would be completely funded by outside sources, and basically we just needed city cooperation. Now we're looking at, we were looking at a total project cost of 150, and now we're looking at a city investment of 150. It just seems like it's gotten where we're just getting out ahead of ourselves a little bit. And I know that that's, again, I'm excited about it. And I know that that's the purpose for this ARPA funding. I just want to make sure that we are taking a look at everything and not just doing things in silos. So I just wondered if anybody else had any thoughts on that.
I know we're gonna eventually have a conversation brought up about discussing the funding and have a council discuss it. This leads into the bigger discussion of the monies. As it was brought to us last year, it was a group when they brought it to us, and we presented it, middle of the budget process. And then kind of was told we had to kind of make a decision, so we just kind of went with it. I'm not against any of these projects. I would just like to actually feel more involved and be able to discuss the projects. And I think the bigger part is, and I think Rick does do a good job of trying to look at the future and down the road. And one of my concerns that I had, that I talked to Jenny about at the last finance meeting, and she reassured me on, was when we start doing these projects, we're gonna be doing these paths and paving them, is making sure we get some more money in the reserves to maintain them, because we're doing the electric for the park, then we're doing sidewalks, and possibly bike paths, and a pump track if it goes through. This is all stuff that we gotta make sure we're putting money aside to maintain in the long run, to make sure we're looking down the future 5, 10, 15 years. So, I mean, like I said, I'm not against any of these projects. I know we're gonna do the one in cooperation, and I still like to move forward with it. I just maybe would like to be able to take the night to think about the numbers before I vote on it.
Dave.
What I like about this is, well, number one, what we're talking about is paving a walking path here in the park. And that's it, unless we want to add a wooden guide rail also along part of the trail. All the rest of it is for discussion later on. So this just gives us loose options. What I like about the project is this fits exactly what was set nearly 10 years ago in the Parks Master Plan. So I think that the people that came and presented that plan to the council at the time, and they passed that plan, I think they set this path in motion, no pun intended. And I think it's nice that we're finally putting this funding toward this. I think this is the right thing to do. I mean, we can have a discussion about the other things later on. And I mean, I don't necessarily agree that we haven't been part of any discussion about this, because the only discussion we've really had about everything else is Greg came forward with other ideas for funding, what we put this funding toward. And we gave a loose agreement, but nothing's set in stone. This is probably part of this anyway. I do agree that all that money should be put toward the parks. What we decide we want to do with it in the parks is up to us. But for tonight, if we're deciding on this walking path, I mean, I would go forward with recommending we do with what has been recommended to us with Project B, where we're doing the base bid plus mill and pave the existing paved path along the mill race. I agree with how that's been dug up, because I hear from my son and the rest of his track team that run through there frequently about how messed up it got. So I think for people that are walking, and we don't want trip hazards, and I think redoing that would be a great idea. So I would recommend that we go forward with D, and then all the other stuff we can discuss over the next 2 years as projects are potentially coming up.
Yeah, I agree with everything Dave said, and actually, I probably don't need to make this point anymore because Dave did it better than I could. But I agree, and I appreciate you giving us options, Jenny and Greg. And I'm inclined to agree as well with your recommendation with recommendation B. And again, like Dave said, we can look at this more down the road as things come up. But I appreciate it, and I guess I agree with Dave said. I raised my hand before.
Yeah, I guess just for me, thinking about this is a finite amount of money. And so we're talking about adding $50,000 to the project that has already crept up to be more expensive than we anticipated it being in the first place. I support the project. My suggestion is that we, think about that $50,000, and the additional money that we're looking at $150,000 instead of $100,000, that it's coming from somewhere. So, if we wanna do any specific projects in the park, knowing what they are and potentially how much they're gonna cost, I think those are all important components to making the decision. So that is all that I'm saying, is that, we only have X amount of dollars to spend on this. And so I just don't wanna look at this by itself.
So I'd like to jump in just quickly before handing it back to you, Mark Davis, to pick it up. But I think what I'm hearing is that there's a general consensus that there is a discussion to be had in the near future about how those ARPA monies are spent on projects, what those projects might be. We have a consensus that those projects will be applicable to our parks. And I think that's appropriate. I think that's what we agreed to as council back in October, November, I think it might have been last year. However, I also want to just remind everybody that this is feasible. This is feasible because we have a $50,000 gift that is being applied to this by the folks at Future Growing Foundation, and through years of effort of the Greenway Committee in just providing us with essentially a template to move forward on. So I think we are all agreed that there's a conversation to be had about the balance and how that is spent. But I'd like to think that maybe we can move forward tonight with a resolution that will allow us to do what we need to do if we're going to do this in a timely fashion, which I think there's some of us are very inclined to do. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mark Davis.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. We have a question in front of us right now is 3 particular options. And I think, Scott, you really provided us a framework for thinking about which option is best. Perhaps you need to, but we talked about kind of maintenance and thinking about long-term maintenance. And that's a compelling argument for me. And I think when I hear Chris talk about the fact that having that path paved all the way through in option B, that we have one continuous new pathway might cut down our maintenance for the next couple of years, rather than option A, which would probably mean that we're going to be going back there doing some work and kind of patching that as we go. So I think there's a compelling argument to be. I hear that it's $50,000 more, but maybe it's $50,000 more we spend now to get one continuous strip of pavement, so we don't have to come back and maintain it. I'm also assuming that some of the side of that, the grass strips, will be also addressed in this particular bid as well. So it's not just the strip, but they're going to be kind of replacing all the kind of grass and making sure that looks good along the side of that.
Right, I think with the sewer project, there was some restoration work done, so it's not there now. If we didn't do the project, the grass should be restored.
Right.
Certainly, when we do the project, any restoration work will be done.
Okay. So to me, that's a compelling argument.
I'm gonna Scott, and then
I just clarification, is B the fresh blacktop or is that the mill and put back down and sees the fresh blacktop?
So B is base bid, which is the new asphalt paths where there aren't any asphalt paths now. Option 3 adds the little section at the end. Option 2 is to mill out 2 inches, I think, of the existing asphalt path along the mill race, by field 6, the baseball field, and paving back 2 inches of new asphalt.
Oh, yeah. I'm kind of stuck in it.
all right, when
So this is today's prices, meaning we can lock this in. I'll be honest with you, Katie, I'm surprised it's not higher than $50,000 because building materials are 3 or 4 times higher than normal. So is that the case? We're locking this price in, coming back to
Right, our
finance going like, we need another 25 or.
correct. This would be to award a contract instead of the budget.
further discussion? All right, how do we get to where we need to get here? We have any number of different options. Luke,
Can I make a motion? I believe Greg said that you had 3 written up.
we do.
Can you get it to a straw poll maybe before to see which one would fit. Is that how we would do it?
I think we can do a motion
May I make a motion?
yeah.
Okay, well then I guess I'll go with it if it fails, it fails. I would like to make a motion for project B, or for application B.
Second, so. Alright, so we have a motion and specific language for those motions. if you'd like.
And we also need to know the 70 versus the 84, because that's written into the motion.
Right, so. Okay.
So we're looking to allow the Greenway Committee to hold on to $14,000 out of those monies, so there's a $14,000 differential.
I would agree.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, we will modify the motion in a second. And, provided we had Luke and then this Len that seconded, I believe,
For option B.
I'm gonna hear the motion now that you made. Greg will tell me if I've picked the wrong one. Motion that as a result of competitive bids being solicited and accepted for the Newark Park pedestrian paths, the common council approves the purchasing agent's recommendation to award the base bid plus alternate 2 and 3 to the lowest responsive qualified bidder, FP Kane Construction Incorporated of Vestal, New York, in the amount of $303,655. And the council further authorizes the creation of a capital project budget in the amount of $320,000 to be funded with a $50,000 gift from the People for America Foundation, $200,000 of the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds, and $70,000 from the Greenway Reserve. And the council further authorizes the necessary budget transfers and amendments and creation of the capital project.
now, do you want to rescind your?
No, I would just ask
Very good.
that.
So we, and Len, you're still good with seconding, so at this point, I think we can call for further discussion if there is any. If there is not, and we'll call vote.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartie?
Yes.
Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Henry?
Yes.
Councilmember Lynch?
Yes.
Well, that is terrific. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Right, and then that takes us to our additional business, and I have, you all have in front of you a 30-day notice for Dazo's Kitchen at 42 River Street, where they are looking to serve wine and beer and cider. And I would ask if there is anyone on this council that suggests that we need to take those 30 days or all right, so by consensus, I think that we are there, so thank you very much. Is there any additional council discussion? Yes.
Len, if you want to go for, I have a few things, so.
I just first want to say thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Lavelle, who just left, for coming down. In the 5th Ward, I've actually been dealing with this issue since March 13th, Friday the 13th of 2020. Once we got locked down, the residents in those neighborhoods started seeing more and more water. I've literally had so many pictures sent to me of the discoloration, but it was good to hear the different folks here at the council level to join in and say, hey, we need to do something different. And I'm glad to hear from Greg, already working hard along with Chris. I'm sure you guys have come up with some preliminary plans. This will be really good. I agree with everything that was said here by city staff and council members of, we're trying to provide the best product as we possibly can. And that's always been the aspect of the city with regards to water, which is obviously a precious resource. So I also share with Lavelle's, I love saving water. My wife will tell you that. So the thought that we have to do this, kind of bugs me. So I'm glad you're here. Stuff also to whatever option we come up with. So thank you. And Luke, you had something?
Yeah, I have a few things, if you folks would indulge me, and most of it having to do with the 1st Ward. I just wanted to follow up with Greg. I know we've been attached to an email chain regarding an issue in the 1st Ward by one of the chiropractor's offices. And I want to thank both of you for really putting a lot of effort into that. I just want to make sure I understand correctly going forward, this issue involving lighting. Is this more of an issue now that's kind of in the hands of the courts? Is there anything the city can continue to do? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say which one?
Yeah.
The lighting issue, yeah, that's, Steve, you can explain better than I. But basically, there's not much the city can do. It's not entitled to the city code.
The lighting layout that we have on file. Agreed to this was an issue in 2006. Is the exact lighting layout that is currently. So it's very difficult for us to enforce anything because there's been no change to the approved layout that was presented by the chiropractor's office and was discussed with the neighbor. And I can share that response to you. Because it's all public records and file.
I think it's important to know the only physical change that's happened since that. A complaint that's cut down on line of streets along the property that previously had provided some measure.
Other complaint, did that? Okay.
Yeah.
I did, and this is in conjunction with some of the folks in my ward. The first thing is just to encourage folks to continue to take COVID seriously. There was a lot of students getting sick at the schools. Valley View, for example, had to send an entire grade home because 15 of the students were sick in class. And we're seeing an uptick. The Biden administration is anticipating 100 million cases by the fall. So just continue to be, please, wary of that. The mayor also prepared, mayor said this better than I probably could, but I was speaking to my, at least one of my constituents, and was encouraged to make a statement, and I'd like to read it if I may. In response to what happened in Buffalo, because I think it's really important. We've seen at least twice I've been here, this is Tuesday, the second or third time we've seen misinformation cause damage in terms of lives lost, as well as things a little bit less serious, a lot less serious. But I think it's important to say, I've witnessed it, and I feel compelled to say it. So, like many of us, I was appalled and sickened by the terrorist attack in Buffalo over the weekend. As an elected official, as well as someone on the Commission for Community Relations and Human Rights, I feel like I have a responsibility to speak out. This terrorist is not someone unknown to us. He was from Brewer County. A map requested it less than an hour away from us. His act in terror was inspired by a rising tendency to smear those who disagree with us as evil. Pundits on certain news networks continually pronounce the dangers of white Americans facing replacement by persons of colors, and have encouraged multiple acts of terror across the country and in fact across the world. It really pains me to say this, but even some of our elected officials on the federal level, particularly one of our representatives a little bit further north, have lent credence to this idea. To those spreading this conspiracy, you are literally getting people killed. Dehumanizing our neighbors as scheming monsters or as pedophiles. Preying on children is sick and getting people killed. I'm speaking as a representative of the First Ward, and many have told me they will not tolerate this, and I appreciate that. It is not welcome here. My heart goes out to those killed in the name of hate in our neighboring community, but this is not enough. These words are not enough. We have to call this out for what it is. It's an increasingly coordinated attack on love and unity by forces that would tear us apart. And some of those forces are elected officials. It's going to take us all to beat back this hate, and that only seems to be growing in the world. Again, I felt compelled to write this and was encouraged to do so by members of the First Ward.
Do we have any further council discussion? Yes, Dave.
Maybe this is what you were talking about. Because Councilwoman Chu pointed this out, that we had a email from Greg today, late afternoon, and did we want to discuss that here? Or we want to discuss it through email? It was regarding goals for 2022.
I'll be honest, I didn't see the email.
I didn't either.
So that's it.
So a lot of this did take place through email, so I think there's a precedent there for you guys maybe having that continued conversation, and myself a part of that through email.
Seems like it might be confusing for you now. 'Cause it just be like-
Well, again, some folks have not yet seen this or had an opportunity to absorb it because of that. Do you?
Well, I could read the email if Greg doesn't mind. It's pretty much to the point. So, thank you for providing these goals and tasks. I do have one general question about 5 tasks identified. 3 of these were indicated as high priority. Am I to assume that all 5 of these tasks are be my five top priorities for the remainder of 2022, above all other tasks / work that I do in the performance of my job duties? If not, where do these tasks fall within my overall priorities? For example, in the 2022 budget process, we discussed the exploration of creation of a stormwater utility. That would be an innovative way to increase and diversify city revenue. I'm unsure how this compares to the 5 tasks listed in terms of priority. Thanks again, and I'd be glad to continue this conversation. I mean, my suggestion would be, just looking at this quickly, is these are priority tasks for the year that we've set, and we would hope that they would be accomplished. If not, at the next review, we would just look at each of them individually, what has been achieved, what has not been achieved, and just go from there. I think as long as they've been addressed, that would be, for me, that would be the most important thing. That there's some progress on them at least.
And the distinction between tasks and goals you're clear on?
Yeah, my understanding was, tasks
Yeah.
are specific things that you want to see timelines for, which are provided goals are more.
Yeah.
Overarching.
Right. Sorry, I might have been using those.
That's fine, just I want to make certain that we're having this conversation here, that all parties certainly.
But that's just my,
You're clear.
that was just my opinion. If anybody feels differently, please.
Yeah, I'll put my thoughts up there. My thinking was that, I mean, our city administrator was, we were kind of giving him our thinking about what we thought was important, and that he was going to respond accordingly. You bring in all elements of the job and let us know what you thought was the timeline moving forward. That was my understanding of how we were going to approach this. So that it was a kind of collaborative effort in terms of kind of goal setting and how we were going to be approaching it. I'm comfortable with telling you exactly what needs to be first, because I think you have a better understanding of that. So I'm comfortable with having it be a dialogue of, given what we've said we think is pretty high priority, given what you feel is high priority, to have a dialogue about that and an appropriate timeline about laying that out. That's my own.
Go ahead, Katie.
I was just gonna say, I think that we also, the purpose of this, or the intent of it, is to speak with sort of a singular voice. So we had our sort of cacophonous messiness out here in a meeting, and so to put it into one thing, to not be pulling you in 100 different directions, but to sort of say, okay, this is the stuff we agreed on. And yeah, just make it a little bit more streamlined for you.
What does that dialogue look like? Does that, to just follow up on?
This is only one person's opinion. I would say, if you're asking me to expand upon that idea, I would suggest that is city administrator Matthijs, kind of looking at everything, the large picture that he understands best, and kind of responding with a kind of here's what kind of looks reasonable, here's what I'm going to be working on, here's kind of the 2022, what is reasonable and doable. I think that to me is appropriate personally.
I just want to make certain that, we are very clear about the process. And we're able to kind of wrap up this discussion.
Go ahead, Craig. I was just gonna say, I know some of you haven't read my response yet, but in that, I think, it's important for everyone to understand, I'm not setting priorities for the city, the council is, but overall, obviously you can't set every task that needs to be done. That's something that staff needs to, work with us, everybody together to identify specific things. And that's, I kind of outlined in explain how I would go about identifying those things through some conversations with department heads and their staff, and then with council over the next couple of months leading the budget process. So I don't think that I can necessarily, accurate that, with a list of other projects that are higher or lower priorities until we've gone through that process. It's not a process where I can just identify these projects. We have to go through what I think will be a series of special meetings with the council, hours-long conversations with department heads after having had conversations with myself about what are the areas of service we're providing to the city, what levels of service are we able to provide, and where would we like to go? And then how does that fit into our budget process? Because as you know, last year's process, there are things we had to cut, we can't necessarily afford everything that we like to do. So getting everyone on the same page to understand our priorities, I think is a process, and it's not something that's necessarily will be boiled down to a few specific top priority tasks at this moment. However, I respect the 5 tasks that were given. That's something that I provide the timelines as to what I think is reasonable, but there are many other things that need to be factored in. I think we need to kind of go through that.
Sure, that's where I was going. This dialogue is likely to be a months-long process that will have some structure to it. And the expectations because of that structure will be clear for everybody, and we'll be able to get to a place where there's a consensus moving forward. That makes sense to everybody. Yes.
New topic. Are we all?
Yes, if we're, is everybody satisfied with where we are?
It wasn't the same.
Thanks, Greg, I did just read it, so appreciate you responding to that.
Yeah, so I had mentioned to a couple of council members about the meeting that you have had this week with downtown business owners, and
Yes.
there folks had expressed an interest in knowing kind of the outcomes of that. So I thought maybe you could talk with us all at once about it.
Yeah, and thank you very much. Carrie actually took notes, which I can share and will share with all of you folks. Very much appreciate your doing that for us. It was a very constructive meeting. I think Destination Oneonta was really the key player in the conversation, as we wanted to get out in front of what their strategies were for the half dozen street closures and make sure everybody was understanding what was happening and had some input into it. We had a conversation around communications and determined, again, Destination Oneonta is going to step up and be a conduit for communication to the merchants and the restaurateurs of pending street closures through sharing of the permit process. Carrie will do that with Katrina, and she'll then share. Katrina picked up from Destination Oneonta, picked up many, if not all, of the emails of the attendees, so that she's got a much more comprehensive list to work with. We talked about the fact of the merchants having already had some information presented around a business improvement district, and if they are inclined to pursue that, that's something that the city would be interested in knowing. And so it would be great for them to make a decision as to what they want to do one way or the other, because it's impactful to us. We also talked to some, it's not at length, but the reality of the city is not just the blocks of downtown, and that what we do in downtown is, sometimes is specific to a general promotion of those 4 blocks, but we can't do things for individual businesses, and we also have to be aware of the fact that we have burgeoning, blossoming businesses now on the East End, the West End, River Street, and those also require the city's support and attention. That's the way to provide that. Is there anything that I missed just now? I think that was about it. It was an interesting thing to have 21 merchants in common council chambers. I don't think that that's ever, certainly not happened in many years. They felt very good about it. It'll probably be the first of a few of these kind of conversations. It was respectful, and it was, these are all A personalities. That I opened a business for that. Being an A personality who is pretty well sure of your take on life. So we had a lot of individuals here that, although they had varied opinions, that many things that were respected across the state.
Was this done through the Economic Development Committee?
No, I just reached out to people.
I would suggest that with the next time any of these meetings happen, that you have the Economic Development Committee tie in with this.
Yeah, I
So
think
I
that makes
think
sense.
it's important that somebody is there for that discussion, or have everybody come to the Economic Development Committee meeting where the entire committee is there. I think that would be really helpful for the council.
I think that not only makes sense, but there's value in it. In this particular instance, we were 2 days ahead of the event downtown, and people were clear, frankly, what was happening and how they could be engaged in that. So, the timings of that meeting was something that created the need for a 2 days beforehand solicitation of folks that were available. Let's get together and talk about this. But it's a good point, and I think Katie also made that point via email to me a little bit earlier, and I think it's absolutely economic development in the city of Oneonta is everybody's concern. Any other discussion? Oh, absolutely. Any other discussion?
Real quick, Greg, I want to thank you for reaching out as quick as you did with what happened down in the 6th Ward. Been unfortunate to be down there on Fonda. The work by the police department, the fire department. Thank you, Chief, for sending you guys back down to help clean up the mess. That just really appreciate it. And the officers that were there were very kind to everybody that was walking up and down the streets to help settle the nerves. And so all that was very greatly appreciated down there. They went the extra mile. I really appreciate that, and they really appreciate that.
Any further discussion? Terrific. And is there any correspondence?
None.
There is no correspondence. I don't believe we have a need for executive session at this point. That's what we all agreed about that. And with that, if there's nothing else,